Go ahead and face that way for me. Go ahead and grab that there on the left. Grab that on the right and buckle that below your belt buckle, nice and tight. It's going to go on just like a backpack would. Okay. So now we're going to calibrate you. Okay. The way we do that is you're going to stand toes right up to this rod. You're going to just stand in neutral posture here. Hold this down at your side like this. Okay. Up. Fingers straight down for me. Good. That keeps this sensor parallel to the ground if you're on it. Okay, you're good. So snap calibration. So now you're all set to go. So go ahead and hit a few shots just to get a feel for what it's used to swinging the vest. It's a little different. All right, so this is your kinematic sequence. Okay, this is the way you're basically generating speed and accuracy, or power and accuracy, from the ground through your body and into the club. All right, so this is an indicator of many things: how accurate you're hitting the golf ball, how powerful you're hitting it, how much speed you can create with each segment, and also how much stabilization you can create in each segment to then transfer that energy up the chain. So just to give you the quick 101 on this, the red line, as you can see by the little icon, is your pelvis sensor. Okay. Green line's the torso. And the blue, brown line here is the club, or your hand sensor, basically the grip. Any negative velocity, when the lines go down below this 0 line, is your backswing. So this line here indicates address. This line here indicates top of your swing, which is dictated by the KVS software as the change of direction of your hand sensor. Okay. Okay. So when that sensor changes direction, that's why that brown line goes straight through the top, because that's always going to be as the KVS dictates the top of the swing. So anything between this line here, top of the swing, and this line is your impact. All this area in here is your downswing. Okay. How each segment is accelerating, how they're peaking in what order, and how they're stabilizing to create that energy to go from your pelvis to your torso, torso to your arm, and then finally your arm into the club. Okay. So I look at a few things here. I've got actually a 7 checkpoint list that I look for in your kinematic sequence. And then I look into your body angles. If I see something that I don't like, I'll look at your body angles to start to tell me about why I might see some things in here that I don't like. Okay. And without knowing your physical history yet, I couldn't make an complete accurate determination, because you might have some physical issues, but I can certainly tell you what you're doing in terms of your motor pattern with your body, and then we dive down and see, is that something physical, or is that something that you just learned how to do throughout your years playing golf? Gotcha. So this is your pelvis bend graph. Green line always dictates bend in our orientations graph, or angles graphs. And what KVS gives us is 3 degrees of freedom. So it gives us bend, side bend, and rotation of the pelvis and the upper body, or your thorax. Plus it gives us the velocity of the pelvis, the thorax, as well as the hand sensor. And that's our kinematic sequence. But the pelvis and the upper body, we get bend, side bend, and rotation. So this is your bend graph alone. I look to see a couple things here. Depending upon how you set up, I look to see this start around 20 degrees. You're a little high, all right? So that's going to start to tell me a little bit about why you might start to feel the things you do that you mentioned to me about your pelvis.
Is that being
anterior? That's anterior. Okay. So it's 26. The more you go this way, the more that goes up.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. I want you around 20. So that can tell me a couple things. Now, I have not physically screened you yet. Yeah. So what I would do next is I would give you a physical screen in 3D, and we can do that, to determine what is your actual neutral pelvis. Okay. So what I would do is I'd get you in your posture. I'd have you arch your lower back or anteriorly tilt your pelvis as much as you can. I'd get the high end range. Then I'd have you posterior tilt as much as you can. I'd get the low end range while keeping your torso neutral. Gotcha. Then I'd split the difference, and that's your neutral pelvis pretty much.
Wow, that's interesting, because that's something that we were talking about with Sam, and that's something I was actually working on, just to relieve lower back pressure or stress anyways.
Right.
And that's what I was telling you I thought I did anyways, but to know it was that much.
That high?
I just had address.
Yep. That's at address. And then you lose lose a little bit of that bend on your way to the top of the swing, which is normal.
Okay.
Because bend, and this is kind of hard to show. I can show you with your actual sensors when we do it, but if I could just use this book as a crude example of your pelvis. If this is your pelvis and you're pitched forward 26 degrees and you keep this stable and add rotation, well, you're going to lose the bend and it's going to translate to side bend. So side bend is this way.
Okay.
Okay. Bend is this way, and obviously this is rotation. So when I go into, a good example of this would be if I use 2 alignment sticks for you. Yellow is going to dictate side bend. So as you can see, I've got 0 side bend right now because I'm standing neutral.
Okay.
This is side bend this way as opposed to that way.
Okay.
Okay. So if I did it with my shoulders, here's side bend to the right and side bend to the left. Here's flexion or bending forward and extension or bending backwards. So if you took a look here, notice how right now I have 0 degrees of side bend and I'm flexing forward about 40 degrees. So now I have 40 degrees of bend with the white stick, but still 0 side bend.
Okay.
When I add rotation in a stable plane, I lost side bend. It went completely to where I lost bend, I should say. It went completely to where my side bend was, and I gained side bend.
Yeah.
On my left side here.
Gotcha.
Okay? So as I apply rotation to a stable plane, bend is lost and side bend is gained.
Okay.
Okay? So that's why when you stay stable with your pelvis, the bend decreases because you're gaining side bend.
Gotcha.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So then we look to see a little loss. This peak here is normal. That peak is indicating your change of pressure from trail foot to lead foot.
Okay.
So as a player loads their right hip in the backswing, and as they transfer pressure back to left, you usually see an anterior tilt to the pelvis.
Okay.
It's a loading, it's a recruitment of your glutes.
Okay.
All right?
Makes sense.
Then as you rotate rapidly towards the target, you are going to see bend decrease rapidly.
Okay.
So that's you going this way.
Going from anterior to posterior.
So so basically going to posterior and rotating.
Okay.
And you're gaining side bend as well. So don't forget, part of that is due to the translation of bend to side bend.
Okay.
But yeah, you are also posterior tilting your pelvis into impact.
Okay.
All right. I actually see you get to about 13 degrees of bend at impact, which is not indicative of an early extension move, which you asked me about.
Okay.
Okay. So let's move on to the total pelvis angles, all 3 together. Here we can see green line still indicates bend. Obviously, it's not as severe of a curvature because our axis is a little different with these other lines because rotation is a greater degree.
Okay.
So it makes it look flatter. That's why we have our pelvis bend in its own graph.
Okay.
Because it's so important. Bend is actually, in my opinion, the most important axis because bend is going to dictate side bend,
Okay.
and then side bend is an indicator of efficient or inefficient rotation. So rotation of the segments actually becomes an effect of keeping bend and side bend in stable planes.
Okay.
All right. So what I like about this is you start out slightly positive, just a little bit above 0, which I love with the pelvis. You transition down to close to 10 degrees, which is excellent, and I'll tell you why. And then you start to transfer that side bend to the lead side, and you get to probably about 5 degrees on the lead side, which might be a little low for what I like. I like pelvis side bend and rotation to be balanced, I call it. So 10 degrees on the trail side at the top should go to about 10 degrees on the lead side at impact. So you're working with a balanced pelvis, which will then allow you to create energy up the chain better.
More easy to rotate.
You got it.
Okay.
So what I really like about the fact that you've got to about 10 degrees of side bend
On the backswing?
in the backswing
Okay.
with about 30 degrees of rotation is because some of the studies that I've done and have seen, the most efficient ball strikers have a 3-to-1 ratio of rotation to side bend.
Okay.
So when you're at about 30 degrees of rotation, I want to see that 10 degrees of side bend.
Okay.
Okay. The one thing I would say to you, if I was getting very specific, and somebody who's PGA Tour driven should be very specific.
Yeah.
The curvature of the pelvis rotation. Now, obviously, we know that negative is away from the target, backswing. We're holding that true. And then everything between here and here, top of the swing and impact, is downswing. This curvature does not start working up until after the top of the swing, which to me is an indicator of an inefficient transition. Because if you're creating stretch in the backswing, you should create more stretch in transition. So as that club is still traveling back, we should start to see the pelvis start to rotate towards the target.
Okay.
To create a little bit of an extra stretch that can then shorten and create extra energy in your system.
Okay.
Because I don't see that curve start to happen until after the top of the swing, I know we can definitely start to critique your transition sequence or the way you transition.
Gotcha.
Okay? And that was something that I picked up in my 7 points in your kinematic sequence.
Okay.
I didn't go through all 7, but that was one of the big ones that I saw that I was going to go back to. And I'll go back to your kinematic sequence at the end of this and tie it all together.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I feel like I would do is I didn't really get not too much ever lead with my lower body, and then I would kind of stop the upper body too, and everything would kind of stop at the ball, and I would go make real big divots too.
Yeah, steep, right?
Yeah, steep.
Yeah, and I can tell you why you're steep from this graph. So green line is bend, blue line is side bend, red line is rotation. All in all, not bad. Couple things that I see, and this is as it isn't the upper body is an effect of the pelvis, but it's a very important graph and tells me a lot about how rotary to linear you're swinging the golf club.
Okay.
And to me, you're a little too linear, and that could cause that steepness.
Yeah, okay.
So what I like to see, and I'll pull up the example graph here in a moment, you're starting out at about 45 degrees, maybe a little high at address with bend.
Okay.
When you get to the top of your swing with side bend, you're looking at about 35 degrees. So remember how I talked to you about bend goes to side bend if you're rotating stable?
Yeah.
You've lost 10 degrees there. So that's indicative of a little loss of posture in the backswing.
Okay.
Okay. And then what I see that you do, or I can infer that you do from this graph, is that you lose it a little bit in the backswing and you've got a linear sway towards the target in your downswing motion.
Okay.
Okay? The reason why I can tell that is if you look at the bottom of all these lines, you see how they're kind of flat?
Yeah.
Okay? With a more rotary motion, because KVS measures rotation, doesn't measure linear, but I can tell you you're going linear because of the flatness of these lines. If you were more rotary and were able to transition better, I would see these lines go more rounded at the bottom.
Okay.
Okay?
Because that makes a lot of sense, because I've seen what you're just looking at on a graph is on camera I can see the shoulders lose their angle on the backswing.
Yep.
It's not as steep as it was.
That would be this side bend line of your upper body.
And then,
that sensor between your scapula there that we have, when you lose the angle of your shoulders.
Yeah.
So here would be a good bend, applied rotation to side bend. If we lost the angle of our shoulders, we would see this.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing of losing side bend in that thorax sensor.
And that's one other thing I've seen what you referred to as the buttons on the collar right here would be less tilted at impact.
Correct.
Which I see with good players, especially with a driver, and longer clubs.
Exactly. So here's where these lines are telling me the story of why your kinematic sequence looks the way it does. Now, if I go back to your kinematic sequence, and just keep in mind, the golf swing is a three-dimensional movement. In my opinion, it's 75% rotational to 25% linear, or around there for a good player. When you get too linear, okay, it takes away your capability to create rotational velocity. And because this is a rotational velocity graph, I can tell you your linear motion is causing you some of these inefficiencies that we're seeing in this transition sequence. Okay?
And that's basically my whole goal with my swing is exactly to do that, is to get more rotation. Because I feel like I'm going to less stall, so I'm going to create more speed, and I can lead the club more, so I'm going to have less closure rate of a closing face.
You're absolutely right. So if you take a look at this here, here's an example graph of a PGA Tour 5-iron kinematic sequence. Now, we're brown in my graph here and blue in this one because this is an older version of software. But notice how the red line crosses first, followed by the green line, followed by the blue line with equal spacing between those lines.
Okay.
That would be indicative of an efficient transition sequence. So the pelvis starting to rotate first, followed by the torso, followed by the hand sensor back to the target. If you look at yours here, in that same area of the graph, you can see that the red line, the green line, and the club are all going through at really the same point in time.
Yeah. Okay.
They're kind of jumbled together. So that tells me that the rotational velocity is being inhibited by your linear motion. So what I would do is I would use biofeedback in the vest. We can use direct biofeedback to start to retrain your body motion. I would do that to keep you stable and more rotary so that this would start to clean up.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
And that would be the start of our game plan in addition to a physical screen to see what your body's capable of.
Okay, nice.
How's it going, you guys? So that was my introduction to K-Vest, and I can already see the implications of where using that 3D motion analysis can be very beneficial. One of the things I liked was it can show you the sequence of your transition, and it can make sure you know your lower body starting, then your upper body, then your arms, so you're getting that proper sequence. For me, my sequence, everything from the top of my backswing to my downswing, everything was starting the same, so I'm not being as efficient as I can. Another thing I liked was where the degree of the pelvis was in correlation with or relative to anterior and posterior pelvic tilt. And I know a lot of that sounds real technical, and it is, but I asked Joe to explain it that way to me because I can relate to a lot of the terminology he's using. But I've seen Joe work with students, and he obviously doesn't talk like that. He dumbs it down, he simplifies it on using that information and then giving you simple alternatives to making a change into getting your swing better off the feedback. So that's the cool thing is, you know, you can record a swing on camera, but it's 2D and a lot of angles get distorted, and you honestly, there's also some things you just can't see in a 2D camera. So with a 3D motion analysis, it can tell you exactly what's going on in the body with all the different angles, and then we can use that information that you wouldn't be able to see and then figure out how to make that into a better swing. And it just gives us more information, more awareness, and that way we can pinpoint our weaknesses more and then turn that into a strength. So I hope you guys liked that video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more tips, drills, instruction. I have more clips coming with other instructors, and I also do my monthly golf giveaway. So thanks for watching, you guys. This is Gabriel Ryder, PGA Tour driven, the movement towards improvement. Talk to you soon.